Whoa, welcome everyone to the first .NET Previews Unboxed live stream. It's happening. Look at all these wonderful people. Hey everyone, I'm James. With me, John, your friendly names over here in the .NET community stand-ups. But all these people you've seen on all of our amazing live streams all across the .NET YouTubes and the Twitches and all the places. And we want to do something special. This is the first preview of .NET 10 drop today. So go ahead and if you've already installed it and downloaded it and got it on your machine, go ahead and drop a comment in the chat. We would love to see that. Lots of folks hanging out everywhere from Brazil. Oh, Morton's here. Watch out, people. Oh, my goodness. We got a Pine in the chat. Oh, my goodness. We have a bunch of awesome stuff to show. We wanted to drum up a little bit of excitement for the Preview 1 drop that's here. And we got a bunch of amazing people. We're going to be showing off some brand new C# features. We're going to be showing off some new ASP.NET Core features. And it's also just about previews too. We got a brand new preview of HybridCache that Mark is going to be showing off. So really excited about that as well. So if you didn't check it out yet, let me bring up my screen really quick here. Boom. This is the .NET blog. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's devblogs.microsoft.com/.net. John will put up a banner, drop a link, boom. Sure. And this year, .NET Bot is swimming. And by swimming, I mean in a submarine. So subbing. I don't know what sailing under the ocean. Does anyone know? John, Safia, Mads, anybody? No.
Traversing
through. Anyways, .NET Bot's doing some stuff, and also navigating. Yeah, .NET Aspire 9.1 dropped as well today. So we do these little posts here for every preview here. So here, drop in today, links to the downloads. And you're going to find links to all of the release notes that are here. So you're going to see it for libraries, runtime, SDK, C#, F#, VB, ASP.NET Core, .NET MAUI, Android, iOS, WinForms, WPF, EF Core, container images, so much more. Oh my goodness. And this is us if I click that button. Now, if you want to dive through all of this stuff, we post it here, but we also post it on the .NET/Core repo on GitHub. You'll find a release index and also basically all of the different releases. So if you want just those posts and all the announcements, you can subscribe to the RSS feed there. And what you'll notice here when you go into Preview 1, it's going to be exactly the same. So you'll see all those same exact ones that are going on here. So for example, if you wanted to dive into one of these new features or performance improvements there, you can tap on it. And that's going to bring you deep link directly into the release notes. So all the release notes are open source on the core repo here. And actually what's neat about it is that you can browse through all of them. I love having like it just over here so you can jump between MAUI and EF Core and the SDK and anything that you're interested in, boom, all right there. But what's really neat is that you could have watched all of this happen in real time because it was all done here. You can see us frantically changing and updating links nonstop today that were here. So if you actually look at this, let me see if I can find the actual PR that we merged in. I think we started like a month ago or so. There it is. That's the MAUI one. Mm-hmm. Boom. No. There it is. Boom. By me. Perfect. So you'll get to actually follow along. So we had this .NET 10 P1 branch. You could have seen all of the things happening all in real time, commented, questions, things like that. It was cool to see some MVPs and community members chime in as well on it. So they're all done in the open right there on the core repo. So if you're really interested and you want to geek out on all the latest things, check it out there. But there's all sorts of good stuff no matter what you're looking for. And I want to point out, and we're going to talk through it a little bit, is at the bottom here, obviously Preview 1 has all the current features of the release, but at the same time, all the amazing people here, all the amazing docs people, all the amazing people that are on the .NET team, there are brand new docs for every single what's new. So as .NET 10 continues to ship, you'll get point in time, Preview 2, Preview 3, Preview 4, but there's going to be documentation just like there is right here that'll be the up-to-date with whatever the latest release is. So you can see the diffs as you're on GitHub, then you can see here's the latest and greatest. So the overview will give you everything here. Here's the new C# stuff. You can dive through it. .NET MAUI, all the good stuff, all the things, all of the things. That is what I got to share.
I love that because anyone linking to docs, everything like that, no more of this like old links to old blog posts with broken code. It's always going to be pointing to up-to-date, localized, maintained docs. So that is wonderful. And we're refining and iterating it through the whole preview process, which is awesome. So,
Yeah, and all those docs are open source as well, so you can always make comments and changes, right, Bill?
Yep. At the bottom of every page, there's a link to open a documentation issue. That'll tag it with the article you're looking at. You'll be right in our GitHub repo. I will say, if you find like really small typos, save both you and us some typing. Just there's a pencil at the top of every article. It'll take you to the repo, and you can edit it and just open a small PR. But if you're going to do, a major feature, ask us and open an issue, and let's talk about it first. But yeah, it's definitely all there.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to kick things off with, I guess, Bill, Jared, Mads. Let you guys take over from here. I'll hide everyone behind the scenes and let you go. Just tell me what screen you want me to bring up and where you want to go from there. How's that sound?
Right now, it's just the three of us, and then Mads will end up doing a demo on this. And so, first of all, I want to mention that this is just scoped to Roslyn. So this is C# and VB. F# is going to be doing some things. They operate at a slightly different cadence. So we're not going to cover that right now. First, I'm going to cover two things that changed in VB. That, as we've mentioned in some of our strategy docs, we are continuing to maintain VB and to make sure it's a good citizen with the latest version of .NET. So the two things you'll see in this release with Visual Basic is that, first of all, VB's overload resolution algorithm obeys the overload resolution priority attribute. So in areas in the runtime where we've tried to prefer one algorithm over another because like span might be faster than arrays and so on, so VB will get that as well. The other thing that's happening in VB is Visual Basic now obeys the unmanaged constraint on a generic type parameter. So it can consume those libraries in the runtime that have added that unmanaged constraint. Previously, Visual Basic couldn't understand it. It would just issue an error and say, basically, you can't use it. Well, now you can if you're passing an unmanaged type. And with the C# features, I'm going to start with going over to Mads and talk about the field keyword and field back properties and our modifiers on Lambda parameters.
Hey, yeah, let me actually just start from the top with the one you didn't mention.
Okay.
So here got my code. This I got plain version preview on, which if you want to play with the C# language features as they come in, that's what you should do as well. So a number of things we do, and often a lot of these little features will show up early in the release, like now, are actually about removing nuisances. Not really like, oh, here's a new feature, but here's a way for that feature to be less annoying. Right? So you know that, or maybe you don't know, if you let's say you do a type of, you can certainly do a type of and just have an empty generics here, for instance. For name of, though, it's been the case since we introduced the feature that you have to give a type argument to a generic, for instance. You can't just omit it, even though the result of the name of is literally the string list with everything else chopped off. So you have to provide something useless. Well, no longer, right? You can just do that. So that's one like, moment gone from C# forever. Another thing is around lambdas. When we added lambdas many years ago, and embarrassingly, I remember this. There's two versions of the lambda parameter list. There's the long form and the short form, where the difference is in the short form you can leave out the types. But we never allowed the short form when you had modifiers that you needed to specify. For no good reason, really. It was just like, yeah, who wants that anyway? But in this case here, now we have an out parameter. Now you can just use the short form when the delegate expects something that takes not just out or ref, but any modifiers that you might have on parameters. So those are like the simple things. I think the biggest thing that you get to play with from C# 14 already is the field access feature. So it's, auto properties have always been nice, except when you can't use them for some reason, you fall off a pretty big cliff. Like, so in the last name here, I just want to trim off the white space from from the value when it comes in the setter, and all of a sudden I have to declare my own backing field and do all my own accessors. Well, in C# 14, we're finally adding the field keyword, which lets you talk about the generated backing field using the keyword field. So instead of having to declare my own backing field, now I can still have accessors that make use of a backing field, and I can write them myself if I want to. So this is an auto property where I just chosen to implement both my accessors manually. I could even do one manually and one automatically, and they use the same generated backing field. So this is really like removing the cliff. You can see the last name up here is grayed out now. We don't need to expose that private state and accidentally use it from other members. There is one little thing to be aware of with this feature. I think it's going to be awesome. It's going to make a lot of code shorter and more readable. It does mean that if you actually had a field called field, then that behaves differently now. You can see we get a little squiggle here saying, hey, you had something in scope called field. Did you mean to use that? Because if you did, then you can still get it by using the the keyword quotation @ sign, or what people often do in already with value when they shadow that, say this dot and then get at the field there. So there are ways to work around that. So that's what we have. That's what I have to show so far. Jared has a few more features that he's going to show.
Yeah, I just want to be really clear. When you did the @ field, that's using the field keyword. So that's the auto back property, or the compiler generated backing field. And when you did this dot field, that's the string field you declared above. Right?
No, they're both ways. They're both ways of referencing the string field declared above here.
Oh, so @ field references the one that you declared.
@ in front of any keyword makes it not a keyword. Turns it into an identifier. Okay. So it also does that with the field keyword.
Gotcha.
So they both mean that's good. There's two different options for fixing it if you wanted this to reference the existing thing called field.
Yeah, so these are ones you can read a lot more in docs. A couple examples I really point out that I really like is partial classes. Now you can, in the declaring implementation, if you just set field equals value, then you provided an implementation. Similarly, if you wanted a default interface member to have an actual implementation, you could do that. And then I'll throw it over to Jared, where we're going to talk about improvements to, we call it first class span, and UTF-8, and I think we're primarily talking about the literal storage there, since U8 literals were a little bit earlier. So over to you, Jared, who is currently muted.
And now I am unmuted, and
we're still seeing my screen though.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not allowing me to share.
We'll have to have James add that.
There we go. Is that sharing now?
Yeah, I definitely, if you can make that bigger for us.
Okay, can I share? Right. How's that doing?
Probably one more is good.
Perfect.
Wow. There we go.
This is just like a C# design meeting.
It is. It really is.
Right. So one of the features that we're adding in .NET 10 is we have decided to take another look at span and read-only span and how they work in our ecosystem. Because over the years, we introduced the span types back in about C# 7.2. And since then, they've gone from this kind of niche high-performance type that only kind of really big experts use to something that is becoming much more ubiquitous across the .NET landscape. Unfortunately, though, unlike other primitive storage types like arrays, the C# language really doesn't know anything about spans or read-only spans. They're just two types that the .NET framework, the .NET runtime team defined, and have some behaviors, and the compiler just doesn't really know about them. And that has really made it significantly more difficult to use them and use them correctly across the ecosystem. And the biggest way that this kind of shows up is in how kind of extension methods and conversions work. Because customers basically, they look at how the type works with conversions and they start to make assumptions about how things are going to work with extension methods and other type items. As you can see here, like I have kind of an array of characters here, and I can easily assign that to a span. I can easily assign that to a read-only span, and this works and compiles just fine. And customers start to take that intuition and say like, hey, because all of those conversions work, I'm familiar with how conversions work on types. Like if I have, you know, a dog, I can define an extension method on animal, and it'll work on animals, it works on dogs, and it should all work like this. And so I should be able to define this has single method, which takes a read-only span of t, and then this should work for my kind of spans, and it should work for my arrays and all these types. And the unfortunate bit is that it really helps if the person doing the demos can actually type. It actually does not work. And the reason why is because, once again, the compiler has no knowledge of these types. It doesn't do any kind of special conversions for extensions, and it ultimately makes this type of thing hard to do. The only way that customers can make this work is if they go through and actually start adding all of these overloads over and over and over again in their code. And this is something that the .NET team has to do kind of in spades. And if you look at the .NET runtime source code, it is filled with all of these like extra overloads just to make these very intuitive situations work. And when we looked at customer code, we found that very often they didn't realize the traps they were falling into when they made these extension methods. It ultimately ended up making their libraries less useful. And when they did make it useful, they had all these weird thunk methods that exist in their code that just kind of take up space and don't do anything that interesting. Well, in C# 10, we've actually, like I said, in C# 14, .NET 10, we've really embraced these two types and kind of made them a deep part of the C# language. And we can now promote all kinds of items for spans that we used to do for arrays. So if I now go and say like if net 10 and delete all those extension methods, you'll see that everything compiles just fine, as most customers would expect it to do. And even better now, these type of operations can take into account user-defined conversions, because something we found more and more common is that customers are writing all of these higher level collection types that implicitly convert down to spans. And so now I can even say like my sparse, if I could type again, can also then go through. And this works just fine too. And so this is something that it's going to be kind of just a small improvement feature on library authors, but should kind of make a big difference in the overall ecosystem. All right, and now can I share? Let's see if I can share like a different screen here. Yes. Share. It is not letting me share one of my windows. That's unfortunate. Okay, might have to do an abrupt demo for this one. Okay. Another thing we've been working on in .NET 10 is a long-standing problem that tends to be felt by our Razor and ASP.NET Core customers. So what will typically happen is customers will come to us and say, hey, I've been working on my ASP.NET project that I've been using for the last X amount of years. I added one more view page to my code, and suddenly I'm getting this error called combine linked user strings, blah, 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 exceeds the limit. I can no longer compile. What is happening here under the hood is that .NET has kind of a limit on how many this total size of string literals that you can put in your code. And once you reach that limit, the compiler just can't emit programs anymore. It's a hard limit in the runtime. So, and this is a pain felt by a lot of our customers as their size grow. They hit this and they're kind of blocked. And the only solution they have is they end up, to get around this, they have to refactor their project into multiple libraries, shift a bunch of code around, and it's not a lot of fun. So we've been working on this for a few years now, trying to find a way, because like I said, this is a fundamental limit in how kind of .NET files work. So in .NET 10, we've added this new feature that you can add to your project files called experimental data section string literals. So customers who are hitting this bug can now simply go to their project file, add this feature flag, and the compiler will encode string literals a bit differently. They will be encoded as UTF-8 strings instead of UTF-16, and they will be loaded, put in a different part of the PE file, which will remove this limitation. And so this should be really helpful for unblocking customers who are running into this problem. The reason this is experimental is because the way that we actually load the strings is still kind of something we're working on, and we want to get feedback from our customers on whether or not the performance and the code generation is in the right place before we decide to commit to this approach for .NET 10 or a slightly different one further down the line. Another benefit that customers may want to look at this for if they're not running into this is by moving from UTF-16 strings to UTF-8, it can result in significant size savings in DLLs if you have a lot of string literals. For example, when we look at kind of like the C# compiler unit test, which has a heavy dose of string literals because we have lots of code that we're testing, when we turn this on, we can see our DLLs decrease by something by 30 to 40% in size. Like for instance, it'll take our emit unit test down from like 15 megabytes to about 11 megabytes. And so this is something that people who are interested in kind of that level of size and loading performance may want to take a look at as we fine tune this for .NET 10. That's it for me.
And there was one question there is what is the limit? It's not the number of strings, it's the size of the strings.
Yeah,
so
it's if you take
the 24 bytes, yeah.
Yeah, if you take every string literal in your application, put them end to end, they can be at most 2 to the 24 bytes long. And once you hit that, like it's a hard wall and there's no going past it.
As we did have some more questions, so I can bring them up really quick. Everyone did appreciate like Morton Jared's signature sound of clicky keyboard. Can you hold it up? What color MX do you have? What's going on? There you go.
This is my Keychron. I think I have the Q3 Max. So yes, this is my clicky sound. It's like the Jupiter Gatoron Browns is the switchy clickiness. My work keyboard is a slightly different version of this, and it's the same switches, but the clicking I think just a little bit better. It's a little bit more subtle, hollow thud.
Just trivia for LDM is we usually make it to about 8 minutes into the meeting where somebody mutes Jared because of clicking.
No.
He'll learn one day. Yeah. That's why I have two. I actually have like two keyboards side by side, one clicky, one not clicky. That way I can easily toggle between the two just because. Here's a few questions from the chat. Someone was asking if there were, when it comes to variants in C#, was there any thoughts on variant stuff in this release? I think you were talking about mathy stuff and whatnot.
Yeah.
Which kind of variant? What's the particular?
Yeah. So there is, safe co and contra variants with generics, right? Array variants, you can do it, but it's not safe. I don't really think we're really looking at anything to change either one of those. I think they're both like way too baked in.
Yeah, I would say the only one change that we have is that as part of making the spans first class, it is, I think a lot of people are familiar with like array covariants. So you can take like an array of strings and convert them into an array of objects. That's safe as long as you're just reading from the array. But the moment you write to the array, it becomes very unsafe and dangerous because you could write like, an integer into there and then it'll blow up at runtime. Spans have a similar type of covariance where it is logically safe to take an array of strings and take it to a read-only span of objects because that is a completely safe operation. Under the hood, we take advantage of the array covariance, and the read-only span means there's no chance of you writing back into there. And so that is something, part of the first-class span stuff that we are doing is making those conversions much more natural and subtle that most people just won't notice them. Like there are certain places today where you get tripped up and the compiler won't let you convert from arrays to read-only spans in this kind of variant shift, where now it's like very much supported and very natural. And people will just assume it's one of those when they go back to older compilers and it breaks, they'll be like, wait, what's the bug? It's like, oh, this is something we just fixed and it should have worked for a long time.
Cool. Question here, we're talking about span of T's. Kelvin was asking, is there any ongoing work around to improve span of T further, interop with external libraries? And he also asked if there are any debugging tools and analyzers around like improper span of T usage in this release or being looked at for .NET 10 stuff.
In terms of the first question, kind of improving span of T, there's some ongoing discussions of how much further we can take the lifetime like rules. Can we like have read-only span of, can we have read-only span of read-only span? Those are items we are definitely actively looking at, and we will likely make progress on that in .NET 11, but not for .NET 10. For .NET 10, we are playing in other areas of the language and runtime. Around for the external libraries, might need a little more context in that one. If you want to follow up in the chat, I'll kind of hang out and try to answer your question there.
Cool. All right. Other question from Martin. Any ahead of time compilation stuff around C# 14 or any changes or things to be aware of if you're trying out these features?
That's more, that would be more question for kind of the runtime team later and their AOT work. We have done a number of kind of smaller features to make ahead of time compilation easier for them. So for example, there's a lot of, one of the things that can trip up the ahead of time compilation is you can add attributes to your code to guide the ahead of time compilation. Like this is dynamic code gen. You have all these little attributes that you can label your stuff with. And the C# compiler was very happily throwing those away in certain circumstances. If you generated closure types or generated lambda types, we have to synthesize types under the hood, and we would not replicate the attributes that you had put onto your code originally. And so all of the AOT toolchain kind of had to deal with the fact that we would drop your attributes on the floor. In this release, we kind of sat down with the .NET AOT team. We figured out all the places we were doing that and kind of a go forward plan so that those attributes that you put in your user code will be replicated in our generated code where appropriate. And that should reduce the burden on the AOT toolchain in terms of all the complexities they need to deal with in doing the ahead of time compilation.
Cool. Awesome. That's super helpful. And don't forget, there is a languages and runtime .NET community stand-up, and the team will be sharing more as things go on as well. Anything else from you? Anything else you guys are looking forward to, or anything else you want to talk about before we hop over to Mike and
only preview 1, so there's a lot more coming. If you stay up to date on the what's new page in C#, which James already posted some of the links to that, you'll see that as there. My goal is always to have things up there by the time it's in public preview. And the other thing you can do if you just can't wait is the Roslyn feature status page will give you the things that are in the working set. Someone's actively coding, and when it says merged, it'll tell you when that's going to be publicly available. And then you can try it out and let us know more.
Awesome. And we'll drop those links into all the chats right now, not only on the screen. I mean, it's like you could try to really copy that really fast, John, and then do that. Let's bring the John Galloway on, the ASP.NET one and only host of community stand-ups. Well, thank you, Mads, Jared, and Bill. Thank you so much for hanging out. And are you muted, John? I'm not even sure, but it's going to happen. Let's hang out here. See you guys later. Bye. Boop, boop. And Jared, boop. Cool. We'll see. Does John's mic work? Nope, you're muted. Oh, you're gone. It's gone forever now. I got to host this thing myself. Oh, my goodness. Well, you can pretend like you're talking, and that'll be great. We did have another question from John. Is .NET 10 an STS or an LTS release? And very snarkily, Rich reminded everyone you can just use a little division here going on and look at the algorithm, the algorithm, little remainder there. If it's equal to 0, and then boom, it is LTS. So every even release, which is great. And yeah, actually on the docs, will be on there as well. And it's also highlighted on the release notes as well there too, when you go and download it and do all that stuff there too. But feel free to leave all the chats and things like that directly in there. And Jared and the team will be hanging out as well afterwards. We'll be posting all those links to all the places. I think John and I both posted them. So just spamming the chat everywhere with stuff. All right. Well, John, I'm going to hand it over to you now that your mic is working again, because we have a little bit of ASP.NET. So
I'm excited for this.
I'm gonna bring up Mike. I'm gonna go away. I'm gonna bring up Mike.
Oh, all right. Wonderful. Okay. Well, this is exciting for me. This is a bit of deja vu because you folks have been on the ASP.NET community stand-up quite a bit lately.
Indeed.
Yes, we are part of the recurring cast.
Wonderful. So I'm guessing a lot of amazing stuff in ASP.NET. Of course, one of the big things I've been keeping an eye on is OpenAPI 3.1 support. Is that kind of the main thing you folks want to talk about?
Yeah, so I want to go through some of the other items, and then I'm going to turn it over to Safia to do a demo of the OpenAPI 3.1 support. So what we've got on screen here is the release notes, and we're going to talk about probably the first 4 or 5 of these. The first one is the OpenAPI 3.1 support. OpenAPI 3.1 is, but numerically, it's a minor release of OpenAPI, but it's actually a major release. And you'll see why as Safio does her demos, but there's a lot of really important new features in here. There's nice capabilities to better describe your API with OpenAPI 3.1, and that's why we think it's important to bring that support. But there's also some breaking changes because some of the underlying dependencies that we have changed in order to accommodate these things, and that's going to wind up having some breaking changes. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to put this in one of the first previews for .NET 10, so you could get lots of experience with it. You could give us lots of feedback, tell us where we've messed it up, and then we'll fix it. So we wanted you to really see this. There's lots of good detail in the what's new document here about what's changed and what the breaking changes are. So have a look through that, and Safi is going to show you a little bit more about that. We're also adding support to generate OpenAPI documents in YAML format, and that's basically by just adding a parameter on your map OpenAPI that has a YAML suffix. It can actually be either YAML or .yml, and that will tell us you want that in YAML format, and we'll generate that for you in YAML. There's a new feature that lets you put a description on the responses of your operations in the OpenAPI document. It's a new parameter on the produces response type attribute. You can see an example of it here, and this is how it comes out in the generated OpenAPI document. And this was a contribution from a community member. So thank you, Sander, for contributing this. There's a new feature that will take a URL and tell you if that URL is a local URL. And that's important to know because if you are doing redirects, you want to avoid doing redirects to absolute URLs because there are some security problems there. So we have this new redirect HTTP is local URL, and that will tell you if it's local or not. And this was also a community contribution by Martin Costello, so thank you for that.
Awesome. I've just noticed a lot of contributions from Martin Costello over the past couple of years.
Indeed.
Yeah.
He's very active, and we are very thankful for that.
Cool.
And finally, there's more to talk about, but the last thing I'm going to cover today is some improvements that we've made to integration testing for apps with top-level statements. This was a little glitch when we introduced the top-level statements, where initially the program that we generated for you was not public, and that made it difficult for your test cases to import that and be able to see that. And so in .NET 10, we've added some support to using source generation, actually expose that so that your test classes can see it. And we also have an analyzer that will tell you when you've added sort of the workaround for this public partial class program that you don't need to do that anymore because we're going to do it for you. So that's just sort of a whirlwind tour of some of the key things that we've put out in Preview 1. And now I'm going to turn it over to Safia for a little bit more of a deep dive on the OpenAPI 3.1 support.
Yes.
Awesome.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Sweet. Sorry, I totally just like infinite screened you all for a little bit there. Cool. So I wanted to talk about support for OpenAPI 3.1. Mike did a really good setup for this. OpenAPI 3.1 is a minor version of the specification that came out 4 years ago. But even though it's a minor version, it contains a couple of like major changes. Specifically, the OpenAPI specification moves to adopt. I'm not sure what draft number it is. Mike probably remembers it
2020,
off the top.
2020-12.
Yes, that version of the JSON schema as opposed to the OpenAPI specific superset that it was using before. So in collaboration with the Microsoft OpenAPI package folks, if you're not familiar with that package, it's kind of like the underpinning for how OpenAPI is represented in memory and serialized in a bunch of different places. Kyoto uses it, Microsoft ASP.NET Core OpenAPI uses it, Swashbuckle uses it. So this is a pretty critical ecosystem package for OpenAPI. They've been going on this journey to bring in OpenAPI 3.1 support and kind of react to the breaking changes in that specification. And so .NET 10 Preview 1 is the first release where we consume the new major version of that underlying package, which I think is 2.0 Preview 4. That's what we're shipping with in Preview 1. It's a major version. It does contain breaking changes. So although there's going to be like some delighters in there, there are going to be some things that will change or that you need to migrate, and we'll kind of talk through those a little bit. So what I've got on my screen here, it's one of the sample apps that we use a lot for demoing, the training API. It's a simple like REST API service to model managing clients and personal trainers in a gym. We update to 10.0 Preview 1, packages that just came out today. Nothing much changes in our application if we head over to our program CS. We can see we're still using all of the API methods that we introduced in .NET 9 to add built-in OpenAPI support. We've got add OpenAPI here, map OpenAPI. I'm using Scalar UI as my OpenAPI visualizer in this application, so I've got the call for that. All pretty standard stuff, nothing changes, but the net effect of it is if we pop into our document, we will see here that by default, documents now get serialized to OpenAPI version 3.1.1, which is the version that uses the like new draft of JSON schema. If we take a peek at the underlying OpenAPI document that we generate, we will start to see a little bit of a hint of some of those breaking changes. So one of the big breaking changes is that JSON schema models nullable types by using an array value for the type attribute in a schema. So if I have a nullable integer, it gets modeled as a type array of null and integer. This is distinct from prior versions of OpenAPI where there was a nullable property that you would set on the schema to indicate that it was null. So the changes are kind of subtle between the two because previously JSON schema or previously the schema that was used in OpenAPI was a superset of the JSON schema definition. But there are kind of these like subtle changes in the resulting document. Mike has been doing an exploration to try out OpenAPI 3.1 spec documents with all of the different client generators and tools to kind of get a sense of who supports OpenAPI 3.1, who doesn't, like kind of seeing ecosystem adoption for it. Some of the breaking changes that you will encounter, as we mentioned, are at the Microsoft OpenAPI layer. So that's the layer that we use to model the OpenAPI document in memory. And we're working on migration docs for this. You should see these coming up soon, but I wanted to kind of peek behind the curtain and show you a little bit of what changes here. And we can see that if we take a look at our transformers. Transformers are constructs that we introduced in .NET 9. They allow you to mutate the OpenAPI document. And because you're mutating it, you're interacting with that in-memory type that the Microsoft OpenAPI package provides for us. So subtle changes include how we model examples or default values. Those now use the JSON object type that's provided by System Text JSON. So they're modeled directly as JSON nodes. Previously, they were modeled with a custom set of types exposed by the Microsoft OpenAPI library. I call this out as an example because I know folks love to like set examples for types in their OpenAPI documents. It makes it easier to integrate with testing UIs that will frequently pull the example you set in the OpenAPI document and use it as like the payload that would be sent if you are using something like a Bruno or a Swagger UI. So some of that is going to change, and you're going to have to like react to those breaking changes. It will kind of be fun. The migration docs will hopefully be there to help you with those changes. But one of the great benefits is that we're working with the Microsoft OpenAPI team to not only support 3.1, but also to improve the memory footprint of the package. There are lots of places where we can reduce allocations and make sure that if you're maintaining multiple versions or multiple OpenAPI documents within an application, there's a smaller perf footprint. We're also looking at improving the API experience. And looking at, hey, there's this API that existed in version 1. Can we take a chance at revising how it works in version 2 now that we have the opportunity to make breaking changes? And that's kind of the segue to say and encourage everybody to try this out and help us give feedback, not just at the ASP.NET Core layer for how we interact with this new breaking change, but also for the underlying dependency and kind of help us improve the like ergonomics of the API there and also the, like the performance and the memory footprint. So yeah, this is a pretty exciting change. It's also kind of going to be the underpinning for future OpenAPI improvements in .NET 10 that I hope people will enjoy. But yeah, fun stuff.
This is great, and I love how you call this out, that there are potentially breaking changes in your applications, and that's part of the whole preview cycle.
Yes.
Is like the preview cycle. This is a time where you can start also like revving up your applications, testing them out, and be ready as .NET 10 hits. And then if you hit issues, you can let us know, and we can make sure that we're working with you in the ecosystem. So. Yeah. That is great. Let me see some questions coming in here. So this is one that comes up from time to time, and this one, possibility to omit the generated OpenAPI document and have it in source control. I'm partly calling this out just to make sure people know about the capabilities here.
Yeah, so this is definitely possible. In fact, we added support in .NET 9 to generate the OpenAPI document at build time. And what's really great about this is that you can then include this as part of a build pipeline where you generate your OpenAPI for your application and then add it right into your source control. And so you can definitely do this. And I think this is really a great step because it makes the API description a first-class artifact of your application. And I think that's really important to be sort of intentional about your API design.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay.
I will add to that functionality to generate OpenAPI documents at build time actually uses a set of abstractions that has existed in ASP.NET Core for a number of years. And we kind of dusted them off in .NET 9 when we did this built-in OpenAPI stuff. But there are plans to improve those abstractions. Folks have reported a couple of issues with them in the past. So it's actually one of the roadmap items to make that build time document generation a little bit better, because we do hear feedback that it's really important for people to have it lined up.
Very cool. I know we've got some other things we need to get to. I'll try and take one or two more real quick things. Building on that one, so you can output spec files at build time, and that's cool. Curious if something's coming towards like generating TypeScript types for clients at build time.
Ooh, Mike, do you want to take this one?
Well, sure. Yeah. So
Yes.
I think the philosophy that we're taking with our OpenAPI generation is we want to generate the best OpenAPI document, which is a standard, right, that we can. And then from that, you can use tools from the OpenAPI ecosystem to generate whatever other artifacts that you want. And Safia mentioned earlier, I've been playing around with all the different generators that I can find for client generation, because that's something that a lot of people want to do. They want to take their OpenAPI for their ASP.NET server and generate a client for it. And there's lots of clients that are out there, NSWAG, OpenAPI Generator, Kyoto. There's a bunch of SDK generators, things like Speakeasy and Stainless. And, so I think there's lots of opportunity for you to use those ecosystem tools to build these things. But those are things that you'll want to bring in yourself from the ecosystem. We're going to stop at the OpenAPI document.
Cool. Okay. One last question here. Do you also make it easier to document all methods or controllers with authorized attribute out of the box? So I think that's already built in too, right?
So there are ways to do this. One of the way that you kind of attribute minimal APIs and controllers is by setting I authorize data metadata on an endpoint. And we did look at an API proposal at the concept of being able to globally set endpoint metadata. So
Right.
you could do something like app dot metadata dot with metadata and then the authorization attribute, and that would apply to um, all of the endpoints, methods, controllers that are in your application. That was reviewed in API for .NET 10, so that is something that might come out. It was actually done to support um, minimal API model validation, which is, I guess, a teaser for another .NET 10 feature. Um, that being said, lacking that kind of like global support, you can still model things. With route groups and minimal APIs, you can kind of create an implicit global route group and then register your authorization metadata on that, and that will light it up for all of the kind of routes that you define within that route group. Um, so it's there. This is a good note that maybe that API proposal that we reviewed and approved for being able to set metadata globally is kind of a good one to take through implementation.
Awesome. Wow, this is great. Okay. I think James is going to be transferring us to the next. Anything kind of in closing or wrap up? I guess I'll jump in. One more thing. Follow along the ASP.NET community stand-ups. Dan has worked super hard to build a really cool pipeline of planning for all the .NET 10 ASP.NET features in the open. So they're all on the ASP.NET playlist, and we've got them on the ASP.NET next page and stuff. So that's a great way that you can kind of keep up with these. And if you want to know more about any of the stuff that Mike and Safia just showed off, there's whole hour-long, like several different hour-long deep dives into these, answering all your questions, code demos, all the stuff.
And also feel free to, use GitHub, use the discussions on GitHub or open issues if you find problems. We love to interact with you there.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Safia. Thanks, Mike. Cheers. Awesome. I think what you were going for, John, is to remind people to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell, become part of the notification squad. Head over to our friends like Nick Chapsis, who will be breaking down every single new feature, I'm sure, as they come out. I saw
him in the chat.
I saw him in the chat.
Hey, I did want to call this one out. This is pretty cool that Rich. So it's true, man. We're building out our content now. We're starting early.
We're going to be doing these for every single preview release. So we'll be dropping them after we put out in the blog post. You'll find them embedded in there as well. We'll put chapters in afterwards. But don't forget also, talking about ASP.NET Core and all the awesome things, is that this morning there was the .NET Aspire JSON versus YAML edition launch party 9.1 in there with the team members, and you and Jeff was over there, and Maddie's on holiday or she would have been there. So check out that blog as well. I'll drop that in there as well, which is really exciting. But talking about it, there's not just like .NET 10 previews, but did you know, John, that there are previews of other things in the world of .NET? Did you know that .NET is not just what's in the box? There's things that ship outside of the box. Did you know that?
I did. There's some good stuff.
There's all sorts of good stuff, like obviously things like Microsoft Extensions AI, which are constantly revving, like all the AI stuff also ships outside of it. And we have our good friend Mark. Boop, there he is. Talking about HybridCache. Actually, I'm just going to let you lead this guy. I know nothing about HybridCache. I'm not a web developer. I'm just a Maui developer. You know me, John. So I'm going to go away again. I just wanted to pop in and say hello. But what's cool is that we taught, I think, there was HybridCache sessions at .NET Conf, and there's been a bunch of stuff on the stand-up, so you can see the lineage. But John, I'm just going to let you take it away and chat with Mark all about HybridCache goodies, because that's actually not part of .NET 10. It's just another preview. So we're calling it Previews Unboxed. Who knows what we're going to show on these things.
Awesome. Hey, Mark. How you doing? Yeah, so this is exciting. I think that we've had, so we had a previous kind of preview come out around the, we've had some different previews over time. Can you talk to us about where we're at kind of in the life cycle and preview, whatever, of Hybrid?
Yeah, sure. So HybridCache was meant to be a .NET 9 feature, but life happened and it wasn't kind of ready to ship with .NET 9. So rather than ship something that was going to cause more problems than good, alongside .NET 9, we basically just shipped the abstractions, allowing us to add in the kind of concrete implementation after the fact. I guess the good news now is that the version of HybridCache that is currently available on NuGet is what we now consider to be essentially feature complete for the current thing. So that's got the last big missing feature, which I'll come on to in a bit. Is currently still wearing the preview tag, but the plan, assuming we don't get something really significant come up, is to remove that for the next release of the extensions set of tools, which will be in March, early March. But yeah, the version that's on NuGet now, it's kind of ready to go, and we want people to have a look at it, really. So if I can kind of give you a demo of those new features, and we'll
Sounds great. And while you're doing that, kind of my high level way of looking at HybridCache is that caching is hard, and it's very easy to shoot yourself in the foot, cause cache stampedes, like make something that so it can give you huge performance benefits, but it's very easy to do wrong. And HybridCache is kind of a way to handle in-memory caching, distributed caching, all the caching things, and just kind of you're applying your kind of domain intelligence to do it right, like pit of success the easy way.
Yeah. So this is very similar to an example that I ran through with yourself in the ASP.NET stand-up. So as you say, caching, and this isn't just ASP.NET, but usually we're talking about kind of ASP.NET applications. So if you're used to caching in those systems, historically you've got a couple of abstractions such as iDistributed cache and things like that, and there's also iMemory cache, and there's a few others. And the problem is they're very manual, and to tie them all together well is really difficult. So you've got to do a lot of manual work. You'll do all your kind of key gen, and you've got to worry about all the fetching things out, deserializing things, fetching the underlying data, all the serialization. There's so many things you need to do, and it's just really easy to make simple mistakes in there that make it really inefficient. In fact, doing it well is really hard. So another one of the things that HybridCache adds to the party is something called stampede protection. So that's if you've got 3 pages come in at the exact same time asking for the same data, and it's a cache miss, it isn't there at the moment. Rather than fetching that 3 times, we can just fetch that once and have those 3 requests queued up on that one bit of work, and kind of reuse all the stuff that's going on in the background. But the other big problem in caching, they always say one of the 3 hard problems in computing is cache invalidation. So one of the other things is all of the existing APIs like iDistributed cache don't only allow you to invalidate things by key. So that means that say you've had 4,000 customers come in and generate some data against a particular path. If something comes up and you need to invalidate one or all of them, you need to know all the things you've got cached, and that's hugely problematic. So that's the new thing that we're trying to solve in this release of HybridCache.
So let me try and so cache invalidation is where, say I've got 5,000 products that are all in my cache, and I change the price on one of them. I want to mark that. I want to invalidate so people aren't getting a cached invalid old price, for instance. Is that an example?
Yes, okay. Exactly. But it's more complex than that, because it might not just be that one feature. It might be that that means that you need to invalidate every, say you're a music shop, that means you also need to invalidate everything that's just associated with drums, because you want your drums page to update. Or it could be that you special offers, or it could be regional. It could be this is now everything in Europe needs to be considered thrown away. So yeah, that's kind of when all cache invalidation gets really complex. And the simple answer, the lazy approach to that is to say, we'll just set the cache timeout to 2 minutes, and it'll be right soon enough. But if
Yeah.
but then you're doing more work.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just to kind of get to the crux of what we're doing in this new version. So the good thing is with HybridCache. So this is all the work we had to do before. Lots of serialization, deserialization. We also needed to know an awful lot about the internals of serialization. With HybridCache now, this all becomes, and I've shown this before a lot of times. This becomes a lot simpler. All you've got to do is register HybridCache, and there's docs that show how to do all that. And then everything just comes down to this get or create async API, where we just pass in our key that we're after and some method to go and get the real data if it's cache miss, and just some other bookkeeping things. And then the whole point of HybridCache is it deals with everything behind the scenes to just make that work for you as efficiently as possible, using a whole load of obscure APIs that you've probably never heard of to do with buffer management and all kind of things like that. But the new feature is this tagging. So now we have the ability, when we're adding things to the cache, we can specify tags, which can be just as simple as a string array. So in this case, I'm just tagging things with a couple of fixed tags, general and sales, but this could be anything you want. It could be, like I say, regional or related to the product that you're after.
Drums.
Drums. Yeah, I do audio things. So
there you go.
Yeah. But so if I now look at I've got a little test app here just to show it working. So this is that exact bit of code we were just looking at the moment, and it deliberately takes 2.5 seconds the first time here, and then that's going to cache for a little while. So we're going to see 0, and then after a while, this will invalidate, and we'll get a new GUID down here, and it'll take another 2.5 seconds, and that'd be good. But with the new feature, as soon as this does another long one, I'm now going to invalidate that tag and come back into here, and immediately it's now taking another 2.5 seconds because it's registered that was invalidated. So just as simple as calling a simple so I've got my little admin controller here. Just by calling the remove by tag async API, passing in the tag that you want to invalidate, that blows away everything associated with that tag or tags. And the really nice thing is we've actually squeezed that into the existing iDistributed cache backend with some hacks and things. And that's not, we're not using new features that all your new backends would have to implement. This is actually just squeezing things into the changing how the payload itself works to kind of support better expiration and the tags and strong validation that the data we've got is the data that we've actually requested. So a whole load of security and feature things in there, but this means it will work with all of your existing distributed cache backends, whether that's MySQL. I'm using Garnet in this case. It could be Azure Redis. It could be anything you want. They'll just work. So yeah, that's the things we've looked at for that. Awesome. There's also some other fun things we're looking at. So in .NET 10, so we've got this example here. You look at that line of code, and it looks like we're passing in a string. And in fact, in .NET 9, that is a string. But one of the other fun things we're looking at is in .NET 10, we're looking to change so this exact same code with no changes whatsoever. Most of the changes are now in the .NET 10 preview for this, or it might be the next preview. I need to check. So that we'll actually do loads of fun span goodness things here, so that if you do a cache hit, which is hopefully that's meant to be the whole point of caching, is you get a lot of cache hits. In all the cache hit cases, we won't actually this code doesn't actually allocate a string. It looks like that's a string, but that's not a string. That's to do with the custom interpolated string handlers feature in .NET. And some of the other new features in .NET 9, the alt lookups and things, really fun features. So yeah, lots of goodness happening in HybridCache. It's all ready. We'd love any more feedback, either on any problems or any things that are great and things we can improve for .NET 10. As I say, it's all well documented up on Learning, and it's available to download just on NuGet. So it's Microsoft Extensions Caching Hybrid. And yeah.
So you mentioned it is in preview. Can I use it in my apps now? Like you said, it's essentially feature complete, and now it's
we consider it feature complete. I wouldn't like to comment on the official support policy of using something that's branded as preview, but yes, by all means, in reality, yes, you. I guess it comes down to your own personal policies on using preview things. It should work. If it doesn't work, there's a problem. Please let me know.
Well, I use everything. I'm deploying it today, so looks
Fair
good.
enough.
This is awesome. I'm really excited about it, and I love this. The simple things, how you make, it can be a huge game changer for applications. I used it like in some previous production apps before I worked at Microsoft, and it's like, boom, caching app a million times faster. Oh no, now I've got a bunch of other problems, right? And so I love the just simplicity, not having to worry about all the serialization, all that. And then tags looks awesome. So very cool. Thank you. Let me see. Trying to see if we got some questions here. Okay. So yeah, is there a way in HybridCache to send a message to channels other than PubSub if the cache has been updated?
Right. So in the current version, no, and that really comes down to we haven't got the backend API to actually support that. So iDistributed cache has no kind of server assisted notification, whether that's because we've explicitly sent a PubSub thing, or whether we've done there's some kind of observability on that back end, such as I know Redis supports observability, SQL Server does in some cases, things like that. We hope to introduce that kind of API in .NET 10. I'm still fleshing out in fact, Jody from Fusion Cache was asking me about exactly that last night. We've been keeping very, very close with the Fusion Cache folks on this. So yeah, we would hope to add that. There's no promise here, but we would hope to add that API in .NET 10, so that so that's really important for any kind of cluster environment, so that obviously all the endpoints get notifications ASAP. We're working on that. That will not be in any of the .NET 9 stuff, just because obviously it needs an interface to be published and people to implement it, and we only tend to make big interface changes like that because it's in the abstraction layer in the actual major, if that makes sense.
Cool. Okay. Just love for tag concept, and so that's cool.
We can't take credit for that. It's actually, if you've used Output Cache, it's very, very similar to how the tagging works in Output Cache. It's just kind of extended to distributed cache. The ironic thing is, if we had the tagging feature from HybridCache when output caching, the current implementation of output caching, it basically could have just used it, rather than because at the moment, if you're implementing an output cache provider, it doesn't use our distributed cache. It's a separate backend because it has to add this separate provider specific tagging feature. I was actually doing a spike on my computer earlier today, implementing output cache over HybridCache, so that it would automatically work on all the backends without having to have. So for output cache at the moment, you have to have this provider specific backend provider. So yeah, we're trying to avoid that.
Okay. Couple more questions here. Why isn't there a get only method on HybridCache?
It's complicated. You can do get only. Maybe we add a get only method that simplifies this in .NET 10. It's one of those things you try and design the API for what you think are going to be the most useful scenarios, and obviously that one we've been asked this one so many times. Maybe I'm just going to add it for .NET 10. But the short version is when you're doing that get or create API method does actually allow you to pass in basically a flag enum that allows you to turn on and off behavior for like almost everything. So if you want to, you can basically disable a whole load of things like I don't want to run the underlying method. I don't want to talk to L2. The out of process iDistributed cache stuff. So if all you want to talk to is local, you can fudge it using enums, but
Yeah.
but yes, maybe we just write a get only method in
Okay.
.NET 10 and have the default implementation of that be passing in the correct set of enums to do exactly what you're asking for.
Cool. Okay. I guess this is just, it's we've been wanting to use tagging HybridCache for tagging feature. Haven't been able to. Seems we should be able to start playing with it. Yeah. So that's
Yes.
what's going on now. The preview's out, right? Cool.
Yep, correct.
Question here on why no get keys type of method to list all the cached keys.
Because that feature itself is not necessarily universal. Well, that feature doesn't exist on our distributed cache. So we can only, unless we invent yet another back-end thing, we can only support features that are inherently available on the caching system. That feature is available on, in fact, feature also doesn't exist on iMemory cache. To get hold of that from memory cache, you need to do a typecast to the concrete memory type, memory cache type, and it's available on there. But most back-end implementations wouldn't support that. And in fact, even if you did, on Redis, for example, crawling the key space is basically no, you don't do that unless you're writing an admin tool whose job is to export things, because it's just so expensive.
It kind of defeats a lot of the purpose of the cache.
Yes,
to start with,
basically, right? In most cases, so I've been working in things like Redis and things like that for a very, very long time, and so many times I see people crawling the key space, and it's like, you've missed a trick. You're not meant to be doing this. There's usually a better way of doing what you're doing, and maybe the answer is tagging in this case. If you're crawling it because you're interested in erasing things that match a certain pattern, well, maybe the trick there is to give those things a tag, all those things in a tag instead, and then you can just invalidate things in a single call.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Let me see. Last one here. Sia asking, does it automatically invalidate all cached items with a tag if a new item is cached for any of the tags?
No, because that's not usually a safe assumption. So usually, so if you think of the drums example I gave earlier, it might be that we need to, I don't know, go off to an AI service to generate a picture of all our different models of drum. I don't know, you invent your own thing here. Whatever the expensive thing is, that is not. It's not usually safe to assume that in fact, it would be catastrophically bad if every time a new piece of data came in with a tag, everything else with that tag got blown away. If you're
Okay, cool. Wow. This is exciting. Thanks a bunch, Mark. I'm excited to watch as the previews progress, and thanks also for everybody watching. A lot of great questions and interaction there. So very cool.
Awesome. I do want to remind everyone, of course, you can follow all the previews on the core repo over there. That's where the release notes are at for all of them. Of course, we post to the blog, to the GitHub discussions as well. And of course, don't forget, you can register for Build upcoming in May. There's going to be some cool stuff happening. John, I don't know if you know.
Yeah.
Things are happening.
I just suspect. Of course.
We did have a cool comment. Rich is over here. Wants to know, what do you guys all think? You know what I mean? Like, did you enjoy this unboxing? You want to see more? Do you want to see less? You want to see more demos? You want to do stuff? Of course, we have all of the amazing community stand-ups that have been going for years and hundreds of them going on as well. Let us know in the chat what y'all think as well. I've been trying to grab folks from different teams. Everyone's working on hard stuff. So making it all happen, last minute as well there too. And don't forget that there's tons of stuff in the SDK and the runtime and the library. So definitely dive through all of the amazing release notes for .NET 10 as well. So hopefully you get to see some awesome stuff here. People seem to be liking it.
Yeah. Wow.
That's it. I think
that's it. This is it. I think, we'll see what the comments are. I had fun. I think it's nice to see kind of everything all in one place, and see it all kind of like, here's what we got, and see it in context. So this is great.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. John, don't try to hit all the buttons. I'm going to press the buttons. I'll press the buttons. Thanks everyone for tuning in, no matter where you're coming from. If you're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, or on X as well, we appreciate it. Don't forget to follow everywhere. We have a new Blue Sky account. John will drop the Blue Sky link in the chat as well for .NET to find the latest and greatest there too. But also, if you're on YouTube, obviously you get the most streams. On Thursday, we're going to be having a Let's Learn.net GitHub Copilot. So if you want to learn, get started with GitHub Copilot, we have a new workshop that's out as well. And then, of course, all the new community stand-ups. But don't forget to like, subscribe. Thanks, John. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Ring the notification bell. Oh, my
Yes.
goodness. Come on, pro YouTuber over here. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out. We really appreciate it. There's a B-Sky link. All right. Thanks, John. All right. We'll check y'all on the next one. Go grab it and give us your feedback. All open source. Check it all out. Thanks, Sean, for helping me host. I appreciate it. Bye-bye. That's it. Bye.